Hello everyone, welcome to chapter 5. In this chapter we are going to start talking about how to develop a security program. We talked about some of the components that we need to have in order to have a security program. But now in this chapter we are going to actually talk about how to develop the security program in an organization. Before I start this chapter, I just want to mention a few things. In this week, we are going to have a discussion board. And so you are going to actually discuss a topic and you can actually post as many times as you want. This counts towards your participation. Every 2-3 lectures, I just give you a discussion board of and the discussion is normally about a topic in information security. So it's normally a general topic, then you can put a comment on it and you need to actually reply to each other's comment as well. Okay, let's start this chapter. In this chapter, some of the things that you are going to actually learn is that you will be able to describe the functional components of an information system program. Also, you are going to discuss how to plan and how to make a staff management on the security program. Also, you will be able to describe the internal and external factors that influence the activities of an organization of an information security program. You should be able to also list the typical job titles and functions in information security program. As well as you should be able to discuss the components in terms of security education, training, awareness programs, and also be able to discuss how organization can create and manage these type of programs. Because in order to have an information security program, we need to educate and train our employee and bring awareness to the society. Also, we need to discuss the role of project management in terms of information security as well. So these will be the learning objectives for this chapter. Now let's, first thing that we are going to discuss is about organizing for security. Some companies, they use the term security program to be able to describe the entire set of personnel, plan, policies, initiatives that's regarding to the information security. Other people or other organizations, they use the term information security. So in some companies you might see security program, in some companies you might see information security. And they use it to describe the structure and organization of the effort that strives to contain risk to the information asset of an organization. So these are two different terminologies that you might actually see in this book, and also maybe sometimes you might see it in the organization. There are some variables though that the management they need to actually look at in order to structure an information security program. Some things such as culture, size, security personnel, budget, and basically security capital budget of an organization can determine how to structure the information security program in an organization. But one of the most valuable, important, influential variable in the organization is organization culture. So if the upper management and staff, they believe that information security is a waste of time, then the information security program will remain small and they support it very poorly. But if the information security staff and the management, they see that as a positive thing, then the organization will grow the information security program and it gets larger and it can get better supported by both managements and also the staff. Also, there is a need for alignment between the information security program in place and the culture of the organization. Sometimes when these are not aligned, then there could be a conflict in an organization and then the program could be left less effective. So an organization get larger in size, their security departments are not basically keeping up with the demand of this complex infrastructure. Security spending per user and per machine declines as the organization grows, leaving most handcuffed when it comes to implement an effective security procedure. But these factors we need to put into the consideration that the most influential factor is that culture. And because if you don't have that culture, then you're not going to get supported for your security program, and you're not going to get that budget as well. Although the size of an organization influences the makeup of its information security program, there are some basic functions that should occur in every organization. And these kind of functions, they should be included in the budget allocation. Some of the functions that are necessary to be implemented in the information security program are as follows: risk management, risk assessment, system testing, policy, legal assessment, incident response, planning, measurements, compliance, centralized authentication, system security administration, training, network security, and vulnerability assessment. So we can discuss this in a little bit more details to see what they are. So in risk assessment, you have to identify and evaluate the risk that are existed in the IT systems. So basically, you need to identify the source of the risk. In risk management, basically you need to implement some sort of a control in order to reduce the risk. And this normally goes with risk assessment as well. In system testing, you have to basically evaluate the patches that are used to for the software, and basically you need to test them to see if they are, you need to make a acceptance testing of these new systems to make sure that they are complying with the policies and they are kind of effective. And policy, as we have discussed before, this should be also some sort of a policy that needs to be coordinated for the entire organization, and it needs to be there to promote the information security policy across the organization. And the legal assessment, we need to also be aware of the laws and their impact, and also coordinate with some sort of a legal counsel or some law agencies outside of the organization to get help from them. Incident response is basically how to handle the initial response to some potential incidents that could happen, such as, some viruses or something some hacking that could happen. And you should be able to coordinate the earliest response to these incidents and kind of minimize some sort of a disaster. And in planning, as we said before, this function also, it has to be something that would go along with the policy, with the entire organization, and it should kind of be part of the project management process of information security. And measurement, you need to take the existing control systems, and you need to make sure that the managements are aware of those measurements to be able to make informed decisions. And compliance, you need to verify the system and network administrator that can repair the vulnerability very quickly and comply with those. Also, in centralized authentication, that means that you should be able to provide a system that manage and grant the system credentials for all the members of the organization. In system security administration, basically the administrators that are configuring the system, they need to be involved in this, and they need to make sure that they implement or they configure the computer systems that in a way that protect the organization. Also, training, you need to train general staff in different information security topics. Also, you need to bring some training to the IT staff to be able to learn about how to be able to implement security measures in the organization. And network security administration, basically the administrators that are responsible for configuring the computer networks, they need to be able to organize basically in various groups by different logical network areas such as WAN, LAN, or various geographical locations. And the vulnerability assessment is basically you locate the exposure within information asset so that the vulnerabilities can be repaired before weaknesses are exploited. So sometimes you do this in terms of penetration testing or basically ethical hacking. So you can do that in order to do a vulnerability assessment in your organizations. So now let's talk about security in large organizations. When we are talking about large organization, we are talking about the companies that have more than 1,000 devices. And so they need to actually have a security measurements to be funded at the level that enable them to accomplish most of the functions that we just discussed. So they need to have those functions in their budget. So when we are talking about those large organizations, the information security department in these type of organization, they tend to form and reform several internal groups to meet the long-term challenges as well as when they are handling the day-to-day security operations. So these functions that we just discussed previously, they are normally to be split into groups. So there would be various groups that would be responsible for developing those functions in the organization. So in a smaller organization, typically they have fewer groups and sometimes maybe they only have one general group. So one recommended approach is basically to separate the functions into different areas, like maybe 4 areas. One group, maybe they can perform the legal and training. Normally those are performed by non-technology or business units outside of the organization. Another group that can be consists of IT groups outside the information security area of management control, such as system security administration, network security administration, and centralized authentication. So the IT groups, they can actually help that. And another group, they can be responsible for risk assessment, system testing, incident response planning, disaster recovery, performance measurement, and vulnerability assessment. These are normally performed within the information security department as a customer service to the organizations. And then another group, they can be responsible to develop a policy, compliance and audit, and risk management. This is also being performed within the information security department as well. This is kind of the org chart of information security staffing in a large organization. You have the chief information security officer at the top, and then you're kind of branching out to 2 different groups: technical security and risk management and policy. And under technical security, you have the security department that handles the firewall, the IDPS, and so on, and then another one that handles the malware and servers. And normally you have 1 or 2 full-time security managers. You will sometimes might have 3, 4 full-time security administrator, and 3 to 4 part-time security managers, and 10 to 12 part-time security administrators in the organization. So this is basically how you can staff the large organization. So the Chief Information Security Officer is responsible to see the information security functions and making sure that they are adequately performed in the organization. The deployment of full-time security personnel also depends on some different factors, such as sensitivity of the information to be protected, industrial regulation, and also general profitability. The more money the company can basically spend to its personnel budget, the more likely it is to maintain a large information security staff in a company. So this is basically an example of an org chart of information security staffing in a very large company. As you can see, again, the Chief Information Security Officer sits at the top, and then you have the technical services and the compliance. The compliance, they are responsible, as we talked about in even the large organization, they are responsible for risk assessment and risk management. In the technical services, then it gets bigger because you have to deal with various type of servers and various clients and things like that. So in terms of vulnerability assessment, in terms of DMZ, intranet and client and server, in terms of malware, in terms of client server, and in terms of consulting, basically in terms of how to design such information security architecture, in terms of implementing the systems, like in terms of technical perspectives and in terms of the architecture, of course. Now let's talk about security in medium organization. Medium organization, they normally have between 100 to 1,000 machines. So this type of organization, they may be still large enough to implement the multi-tier approach to the security that we just discussed about. But these type of organizations, they need to actually also implement the functional areas that are assigned to the other department within the IT. But outside the information security department, especially the central authentication function is also important. The medium-sized organization, they only have one full-time security person, maybe with perhaps 3 individuals that are responsible for implementing the information security responsibilities. So they have a security manager, and then they have a security administrator, and maybe a part-time technician or something, or maybe up to 3 technicians that can help support the security responsibility of the organization. Now let's look at the security in a small organization. A small organization, which means that we are dealing with fewer than 100 systems to supervise. They normally have a lot of challenges because normally one person who is a jack of all trades is responsible for making sure that the security is implemented. So normally there is a single security administrator, maybe sometimes with 1 or 2 assistants for managing some sort of the technical component. So normally sometimes a network administrator play a lot of roles, and sometimes play as also the network administrator could play as a information security administrator as well. So resources are limited in the smaller organization. So the security administrator normally turns to open source software or freeware to lower the cost of assessing and implementing the security. In a smaller organization, security training and awareness is most commonly conducted on a one-by-one basis, with the security administrator providing advices to the users when they need it. So it's not something that has a plan that are doing it. Whenever somebody needs it, the security administrator gives them that advice. Some feel that a small organization, to their advantage, avoids some threat precisely because of their smaller size. They're thinking that some hackers or those hacktivists, they normally go after larger organizations than going after smaller companies. And also threats from insiders are less likely in an environment where every employee knows every other employee. Generally, the less anonymity an employee has, the less likely he or she feels to be able to get away with abuse or misuse of the company's assets. In the smaller companies, normally that individual who is responsible for managing the network and the IT is also managing the information security. So that person needs to work with those functional areas that we mentioned, and also sometimes they get help from 1 or 2 assistants. So this is the org chart. In the information security staffing in smaller companies, you will have a security manager, and sometimes you might have a security administrator or sometimes security technician. So that's just one person who manages all of that, and sometimes it gets support from a part-time person that helps them. Normally the network administrator is responsible for the security of the organization as well. So this is it for this part of chapter 3. In the next part, we are going to talk about placing information security in an organization. See you in the next part. Bye-bye.